Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. I hope everyone is doing all right this morning. I have a slate of shows that I'm going to try to get through. Let's hop across the pond. First, let me make sure my sound is right. Guys, I've said again, I keep saying this, I hate to have to say it. My channel has been demonetized. Because my channel has been demonetized, if you want to give through Super Chat as we go about the show, it's an alternative version of it that's below. You can click the link and it will take you to a PayPal alternative. Anything that you give, a little Star Trek icon will jump up and dance and shake for you in a little box in the window. It's like a thank you from me to you. So let me check the sound. Sound looks okay. Always check your mic. Good. And good. Perfect. So, I'm sorry. All right, good. Let's hop across the pond. Tom Watson, deputy leader or deputy labor leader, Tom Watson, works with Jeremy Corbyn. As you know, as you may not know, I don't want to assume, there's this big anti-Semitic row, as they call it in Britain, around Corbyn. Corbyn is not accepting what they want him to accept as a specific naming of what anti-Semitism means. And as for this, they've said such bad names, calling him a fucking anti-Semite in one case. But they've attacked him for this. Entirely attacked. They have squat to show the man doesn't have an ounce, not one scintilla. There's not one cell. If you scanned him with some kind of beam that you could use to essentially scan his whole body, you would not find one morsel of anti-Semitism. They have nothing to show for it. And yet they flagrantly use the language. They hit him with it over and over and over again because he doesn't use their standard of the word. Jeremy Corbyn is not wrong for just arbitrarily taking their standard. Now, the thing is, you would think that when you're in this kind of foxhole, you would want people to back you up and stand by your side. And unfortunately, turncoats. One of those turncoats is named Tom Watson. Tom Watson on Sunday breaks ranks and comes out saying there will be a torrent of something. How did he say it? Where is it? Essentially, Tom Watson has broke ranks and has gone after labor for not accepting, right here, a vortex of eternal shame and embarrassment. I love the way Brits say things. And encourage the party essentially to just cater to the demands of this interest. Now, there's an optics of this, and there's a reality to this. So first, let's talk about the optics. Tom Watson makes the point of saying, look, people are hitting out at me. After he did this, there was a wave on the internet, a campaign telling Tom Watson to resign. Resign Tom Watson. Hashtag resign Watson. Hashtag resign Watson. And it did this because they understood, A, the reality of it. B, they knew that Tom Watson understood the reality of it. And C, he made his comments anyway. Let's talk about the reality. Theresa May's government is in utter shambles. It is falling apart every step she takes. It is disintegrating before our eyes. I call her a zombie because I don't know how she's even still up. Boris Johnson breaks ranks, resigns in a big splashy display with sparkles, screaming the dream of Brexit is dying. It's like a wistful child. David Davis, same thing. David Davis walked out like he didn't have a care in the world. Put a knife in Theresa May just before she went to Checkers. That Checkers plan was dead on arrival. And yet she still lurches along, loses an arm, loses a leg, hops along. So that's one chess piece. A government that's in shambles that could collapse at any moment. And it's very possible that the only thing that's going to make some resolution of what's an impossible situation is another election. Let's move to the second chess piece. Labor. Jeremy Corbyn has packed Labor's benches like gangbusters. Labor is packing houses, and Jeremy Corbyn is a goddamn rock star. Now, you can understand, it's just like here in America, just like Democrats hate Bernie Sanders, seethingly hates him, because they know that if Bernie Sanders took office, that it would be the end of the Democratic Party. Not because they couldn't necessarily get votes, it would be the other way around. It would be the end of the Democratic Party as we currently know it today. As we know it today. Because you would find that all of the stuff that they've said, these neoliberal policies, the reason why, almost like this kind of an act of God for the way society is, would have been a myth. You would find that those neoliberals who were running the process were bought. And that ultimately, what Sanders is talking about, what the actual left says, is right. The same thing would take place in Britain if Jeremy Corbyn gets in office. Because at that point, you get to see what a left government looks like. And if it works, everything that the left and the right has said about Corbyn would found itself to be a lie. They would lose all credibility whatsoever in the face of what Corbyn is doing for Britain. Blairites are terrified. They're terrified. Now, there are two forces that are acting here. In the first one, you have Jeremy Corbyn, who has been supportive of Palestine. Now, supportive of Palestine in this case just means he's a rational human being that doesn't have an overt bias towards Israel. That's all. That's all. All of this, to some degree, from one strand, comes down to this. So let's say the first strand is this. Let's put a pin in it. Blairites terrified of Corbyn taking power. Even if that means propping Theresa May up on some of those votes, they're terrified of Corbyn taking power. That's the first point. The second point, the Jewish lobby. Jeremy Corbyn is not overtly in the tank for Israel. He has expressed support for Palestine. Well, that's a red flag. You have somebody who is within spitting distance of the prime ministership, who has expressed support for the Palestinian cause. In this, you have two strands that find a common ally in this, meaning they have an alliance. The Blairites and the Jewish lobby. One of the things that they showed was essentially a spy that Israel had that was sent out the country when they found that they were trying to disrupt, or at the very least trying to choose certain electoral patterns in Britain. And you had Hodge, who's screaming at Corbyn, calling him a fucking anti-Semite, was exposed that she was already talking about plans to essentially take Corbyn out, meaning a leadership challenge, months in advance. All of this stuff is coming up purely because you have a person who has supported Palestinian causes that is within spitting distance of the prime ministership of the UK. The Blairites are terrified, and the Israelis are terrified. And they are turning this into hysteria. He's not anti-Semitic because he's anti-Semitic. He's anti-Semitic because he's pro-Palestinian. There's a difference in those things. And mind you, being pro-Palestinian doesn't necessarily mean you're against Jews. There's a difference in those things. The issue here, and the reason they want him to take the language, is because they don't want him to be able to criticize the state of Israel in the way that they want to be able to criticize the state of Israel. That's the beginning and end of it. He's, to some degree, pro-Palestinian. If you're a rational human being, and you look at the world and you say, hey, the United States, at the very least in recent history, the idea that the United States is supposed to be some fair arbiter in an Israeli-Palestinian settlement, when one side has nuclear weapons and one side, even when one side, the Israeli side, is murdering en masse the Palestinian side, the United States will still continue to give weapons and yet still call themselves an honest arbiter. A rational human being looks at that and says, it is impossible for you to be an honest arbiter if one side is murdering the other side and you continue to give weapons and resources to the side that's doing the murdering. If you're Jeremy Corbyn and you say that, you're an anti-Semite. You're an anti-Semite. That's just being a rational human being. If you say that there's an occupation of the Palestinian territory, you're being an anti-Semite. That's the point. That's the argument. The argument takes place here over whether or not the labor leader or people in labor can criticize Israel, who at this point has called themselves a Jewish state. Racist, by definition. a Jewish state. This stuff is nonsense. Tom Watson has to know this is nonsense. Tom Watson knows that the Blackites are terrified. He knows that the Israeli lobby doesn't want Corbyn in there because at the end of the day, he has some level of support for Israel or for the Palestinians. He knows this. So this is not a situation of somebody being a political novice who doesn't know this stuff. He knows this. The comments that he's making is well within the context of knowing all of this. Meaning he gets the reality of this and he's still making these comments. Meaning he's making these comments for an overt reason in order to weaken Jeremy Corbyn. These people are attacking him, saying resign, because they are aware of the reality of the situation, regardless of what the optics are. They're aware of the reality of the situation. They're aware that he is aware of the reality of the situation. In which case they said, Tom Watson needs to resign. You cannot fulfill let's say, fulfill your job. You're attacking the labor leader at a time where he needs your support the most, and at a time where you should support him the most. It's an occupation. They are militarily occupying somebody else's territory. And the idea that if you say that you're being somehow anti-Semitic, that you can't criticize the state of Israel, this is nonsense. I don't give this the time of day. Now, here's the other point. Racism, from the standpoint of the left, if it exists in the Labour Party, it's not one of those things that is just bubbling up because they hate quote-unquote Jews. It's derivative of what's taking place from the standpoint of the state of Israel. There is a conflation that takes place. Israel at this point is calling itself a Jewish state, as if what it's doing is representative of all Jews. It is not. Full stop. It is not. Just as Zionism is different than Judaism, well, Israel is not endemic or does not represent all Jews. That's the first point. The second point is, if somebody is on the left and they're being anti-Semitic, it's possible they're being anti-Semitic from things that the state of Israel is doing, not necessarily that's inherent to the individual that's a Jew. This stuff gets conflated. This is not me making an excuse for it. This is me trying to explain why it may take place from the left. Well, it takes place or not from the left. It's a different point in saying that Jeremy Corbyn himself is somehow racist for not taking that specific definition that they want. He's the leader of Labour. He can take whatever definition he wants. Let's take a look at this. Corbyn is very definitive when he answers this. But I will wager even this wouldn't be enough. I bring up that stuff and try to explain why people behave in particular ways because I think it's important. It is not enough to say XYZ has taken place. It is important to try to understand why XYZ has taken place. Otherwise, you're just persistently allowing XYZ to continue to take place over and over and over again. This, however, is a political attack. And I regard it as such. And it is a political attack by two factions, who have interests that align with one another. The Jewish lobby and the Blackites. And they're using this to weaken Corbyn at a time when Labour should be unified, seeing as the government itself could implode at any moment. This is Corbyn giving a response to the nonsense that they're hitting him with.
Do not do it in my name or the name of my people who use anti-Semitic poison. People who use anti-Semitic poison need to understand you do not do it in my name or the name of my party. You are not our supporters. And anyone who denies that this has surfaced within our party is clearly actually wrong and contributing to the problem. I want to make it clear that any government I lead will take whatever measures are necessary to support and guarantee the security of all Jewish communities and their culture. I acknowledge there is a real problem of anti-Semitism that Labour is working to overcome. And if any part of our national community feels threatened, we must all ensure that these fears are put to rest.
I don't know how people in Britain are taking this. I would hope they see it for what it is, but I don't know if they're seeing it for what it is. I know in this country there's a reality to things, and there's, let's say, the overcrest in the way that people experience that reality. Meaning, in the same way that you look at this and say, okay, what's the reality versus how people are seeing it with the political optics? Same thing happens here in the United States. I don't know how people are completely seeing it. One of the interesting points, they're saying that Jeremy Corbyn is backing down on some of this. Now, again, I think all identities need to be defended. Full stop. Like, be it racist, anti-Semitic, I have this thing in my head that I want a certain degree of freedom, and I want other people to also have that degree of latitude of freedom. Means I don't like this idea of anti-Semitism, racism, etc., etc., etc. But I also don't like it when the label is used as a way to stem or to undermine criticism of Israel, or for that matter, a particular culture or race or gender. So saying something about Hillary Clinton and you say, oh, you're just sexist or racist. What the fuck are you talking about? No, I made an actual criticism. And to some degree, I have to be honest. It's not even a knee-jerk reaction. There's a certain repugnant nature about using that in a political way for something that's an actual real thing that people actually have to deal with on a daily basis. So, but nevertheless, Jeremy Corbyn in this was apologizing. Let's take a look at right here. So let's look at the Watson stuff in this one. I don't want to keep this one long. Tom Watson has set out a social media campaign that ousts him as Labour's deputy leader following his warning that the party faced a vortex of eternal shame unless it resolved the escalating row over anti-Semitism. Now, they're real Nazis in the Ukraine that the Israeli government is funding. But Jeremy Corbyn is supposedly an existential threat to all Jews in the UK. This stuff is nonsense. Utter nonsense. Even the language should get across how much of a nonsense thing this is. His remarks came after Jeremy Corbyn apologized for the hurt caused to many in the Jewish community as he denounced those who use anti-Semitic poison in the Labour Party and said, "You don't do this in my name." What I wish he would have added to that, just one extra item, is, I also want to hit out for the people who are using anti-Semitism for political gain. That too. Because while there may be real people out there who may feel a particular way, who's buying into this, there are also people who are using this for political effect. And I wish you would have brought that up also. So, I'm going to end this. I'm not going to keep this one long. But, yeah, my point of this is, Tom Watson knew exactly what Tom Watson was doing. Tom Watson is being a political actor, and he's trying to undermine Corbyn in this. Corbyn should accept no definition that would allow him or disallow him to criticize Israel. Full stop. And calling themselves a Jewish state to some degree is trying to undermine criticism by being able to say, oh, you're being racist, you're being anti-Semitic. So, all right, I'm going to end this. And look, here's another thing. Because you make a good point, Marshall Villager. As a political entity, Israel should be dismantled. Israel is stealing more and more land. Now, you're a rational human being. You look at that. You say, well, there is no deal in place. There is no, they're just stealing land. They're breaking international law and stealing land. And one of the countries, the superpower, is protecting them as they do this. So they just continue to do this. If they steal, murder, massacre, put Palestinians in prison, put kids in prison, you have a painter that's painting a portrait of a woman, and they lock up the painter. Like, I'm trying to get across, this is a rogue state. Now, that rogue state is protected. So what do you do with that situation? You have the land that's being occupied, you have several refugees, you have a country that's called themselves a Jewish state, literally, at this point, acknowledging, at least with action, if not in word, that they're an apartheid regime. Are you not supposed to criticize that? Are you not supposed to criticize that? Jeremy Corbyn is holding his shape. Tom Watson is being a political actor, a Blairite, and is turning around and hitting him in the knees at a time where they should have solidarity, seeing as they are absolutely right. The Jewish lobby is conspiring with the Blairites in order to try to attack Jeremy Corbyn on this. Tom Watson knows what is taking place, and Tom Watson took this time to hit Corbyn. Yeah, that campaign that says Tom Watson should resign because Tom Watson can't be trusted to hold the party line. That's what I think. So I'm going to end this here. If you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. You can always support through Patreon. Somebody gave a donation, and what was the donation? Star Trek meme. Damn it, Jamal. I'm a politician, not a leader. Reminds me of the Spaceballs quote. You gotta help me. I don't know what to do. I can't make decisions. I'm a president. Yeah, I know, right? I know. Clyde Illusion. Jamal, I agree. Identity politics is used as a tool by establishment to enlist and divide the classes. Yes, they do. It does. Look, the real thing that we need to have a conversation about is this issue of class. 95% of the wealth going to the top 1% is abysmal. If you do the work, if you have a society where you're doing the cleaning, you're doing the cooking, you're keeping the lights on, you're keeping the internet running, you're building the programs, you are the drivers of that society. You are doing the labor of that society. You should get the majority of the gains. You should get the majority of the gains. There should not be anyone sleeping on the street in a society that is spending $717 billion on a military budget. Full stop. It gets across a certain degree of lunacy. You have all the money in the world when it comes to killing people, but when it comes to making sure your kids don't have debt on their backs, that they're not, because for all intents and purposes, if you're taking out a loan, you're an indentured slave. Full stop. You choose your plantation, but you are choosing a plantation because you're working that money off. It's almost no difference in this. You have a little bit of more political latitude in regards to the way you stay and everything else. But that's still just an extension of the system, the way that system was. At some point, why do you want to remain wage slaves? Why? Why do you want to remain in a system that allows wage slaves? If we have the technology that could allow us to essentially be free, why don't we use that technology for such? We don't do it that way. We use the technology for the whims and the ends of a greedy and graspy top 1% to maximize their profit off. It's not used for the benefit of the society. Technology in itself is not being used for the benefit of the society itself. It's being used to maximize profit. If there's not a way to make a buck out of it, it doesn't get built. That's a lunatic way of organizing yourselves. I guess that's all I'm saying. All right, I'm going to end this. Yeah. A Star Trek meme. Thank you. I'd like to see that real person's name, and I think that's Balthazar, but I can't necessarily tell. If you want to trans Israel beyond recognition, what do you want to preserve? Why not agree Israel should be dismantled completely? No. I don't agree or disagree. My thing is, what do the Palestinians want? It's not for me to necessarily say, this is what should take place. What do the Palestinians want? They're the refugees. They're the people who are being militarily occupied. What do they want? Last I've heard, they wanted a one world nation, or one nation. One man, one vote. Well, Israel doesn't want that, because Israel, in their eyes, it's destroying Israel. So they ask this question of, are you for the continuation of Israel? And if the moment that you say, well, I'm for one man, one vote, you're destroying Israel, completely missing the fact that Israel destroyed Palestine. I mean, shit, man, let's have an honest conversation if we're going to have the conversation. All right. Yeah, I'm in this because I'm going to start ranting. All right, guys. If you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, you can always support the Patreon or PayPal. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.